Recording.
We'll call the finance meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Pat Kinney,
Here.
Ron Stendor,
Here.
Clarence Campbell,
Here.
Dick Poofall,
Here.
and Brad Ray is excused.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to 2, approval of the agenda.
Ron will make a motion. We approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Second by Clarence. Is there any discussion on the agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we'll go to public comment pertinent to agenda items, resolution, ordinance of the day. Is there anyone here for public comment online or on the phone for public comment? Anyone in the room, online or phone for public comment? Anyone in the room, online or phone for public comment? Hearing none, we will move to 4, discussion and action items. 4A, approval of Finance and Economic Development Committee meetings from June 4th.
Ron will make a motion to approve the Finance and Economic Development Committee meetings minutes.
This is Clarence. I'll second.
Any discussion? This is Pat. I've got a couple of comments. First one, Caroline, the spelling of your last name is Trombly, or is it EY?
TW.
I'm sorry, TWOMBLY?
Yep.
Okay, so in the minutes, we have an EY, so I'll correct the spelling on that. And then another item 4D, the first 2 sentences there, I would like to suggest a change for a couple of reasons. One of which is I want to put a date on this, so if someone's looking at the minutes, they know what we were looking at. So I'd like to replace the first 2 sentences of 4D with Steve Corbelli explained that the library levy was not updated when the budget was passed October 28, 2025. The correct amount was reported to the state. That gives us a date to which a reader of the minutes could understand what we were looking at. And the pertinent thing is the correct number was reported to the state. So I'd like to replace those first 2 sentences with what I just read, and I sent that to Lori yesterday. So if we approve that, we could do that. And then under 4G, we go down to 4G. Just before the 40 and 50,000, right smack in the middle, that the vehicle could possibly afford to, I think that would be that the vehicle could possibly be 40,000 instead of 50,000. Could possibly be 40,000 instead of 50,000, if that makes sense. Yeah, instead of 4.2 ahead of the 40,000, could possibly be 40,000 instead of 50. So I would like to amend the minutes with those changes. Is there a second?
Ron will second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we'll go to 4B, financial consultant updates. I see Steve here.
Good morning. So we're going to do this maybe a little differently today, only because with Carolyn on board, she actually prepared the report and we discussed maybe that she'd walk you through it. We'll be here just to answer questions. But if Carolyn, if you're all right doing that, go ahead. Otherwise, I can run through it.
Yep. So this report is as of the end of May. June data wasn't fully completed yet, so we didn't want to include that. You know, things are moving along. I guess some standout things that might raise some questions, just under the debt service revenue line, you'll see that it's 180%, and that is true, not an error. It's just because the Snowmobile Club paid more than we were expecting this year for their groomer, I believe, the groomer equipment that we have a loan for them. So that's all that is. That's why it's higher. The other line item that may stand out only because in revenue, only because when you look at the expenditures, they don't match exactly, is the CDBG Rehabilitation Transitional Housing Grant. Normally those expenditures and revenues match exactly. It's just the timing for getting the payment with that, because we're just the transition, the fiscal, the pass through, the pass through for that one. So that will, rebalance here soon.
Well, the federal government ended that program, so the housing authority had to return all the CBDG money to the DOA.
Okay. And what does that mean for us?
It's just a momentary blip for us.
Okay.
That's all.
Then moving down into expenditures, I don't think there was anything that was standing out here. Things are pretty on par with how they were last year. Our expenditures are a little higher than they were last year, but so are our revenues. So at this point, Steve and I weren't identifying anything that was out of the ordinary or concerning, and as of the end of May. So, is there anything else you want?
Any questions, comments?
No, I think that was good. Just to add, on the expense side, I think the biggest difference there is if you look at your capital funds, it was just in how they were spent during the year. Last year there was only 387 at this point, and this year, if you can scroll down just a little bit, Dan, you're at 1.7. So 1.4 million roughly, which is most of your difference there. Otherwise, everything looks on par, like Carolyn said, normal, so to speak.
So I have a question. I'll direct it to Caroline. You're a little new with this, but my question is a couple things related to ARPA. I'll use as an example. Could you explain where we're at with ARPA and the entries on both because I'm trying to make sense both in revenues and expenditures, because on the expenditures, we've got 0%. So, okay, we haven't used that money. But then in the revenues, there's no entry for the total budget, and yet we've got this ARPA money, which I believe we need to use by the end of the year.
We already obligated all that money.
We've allocated, but
Well, it went to fixing the building.
so I see the 11,800, I believe it is in there. So I'm trying to understand why that's there and why I'm not seeing entries elsewhere that help me make sense of this. And on a somewhat related note, this is partly, I'm sure, from having taught math for so many years and endless percent problems. I'm always looking for the portion, base, and rate. And so, okay, if I see percents in there, which I see some percents, like right across from ARPA there, I see 0%. That would suggest the portion is 0, and I'm trying to identify what number to use as a base. So one thing with Excel and some of these software programs is they don't pencil in numbers. And so then if someone who's not familiar with what went where or where things go or where they came from, it's a little harder to make sense of it. So I'm not making sense of the ARPA right now.
We'll have to look into that. It's possible that this might be LATCF funding that we're.
Yeah, I think I ran a report, Carolyn.
Okay.
It's interest off the LATCF, and the ARPA was listed as the fund name. It actually is like, because LATCF is a component of the American Rescue. We're kind of dealing with this in your audit report too, because like you said, Mr. Kinney, the program's supposed to be spent by the end of this year. You guys did spend all your money, I believe, as of last year, but for sure this year. But you do have LATCF left, and that is in that fund, and there are dollars being earned as interest, and that 11,000 is interest from those funds sitting in a savings account, I believe. And then the thing with the percentages, yeah, Excel is kind of weird. If there's no budget amount, which you don't typically budget a number in that fund, it gives you like an error. In fact, if you look at that, you'd be like, a huge percentage increase over your budget because you collected 11,000 and the budget was 0. So just to try to keep it from putting out those unwieldy looking percentages, which really aren't true. It just is listed as a zero because it's not, there was no budget.
Okay. So then, as far as reporting and auditing, we've got ARPA showing on that. And so as you do things, do we need to, if we get audited, which we will, we'll have an auditor, do we need to or want to remove the ARPA from stuff and put
We've
some other label so that we don't get flagged?
Yeah, we already
re-requested.
told our, we got our draft financials back and we asked the auditors to change it from ARPA
Okay,
to LATCF. So there's no
Alright.
confusion.
okay.
Yeah, and we did mention that to them, I think last year even, because I think you had spent all your money or committed it by last year. And their comeback was, well, LATCF is really a component of the ARPA legislation, so we're going to keep it that way. But now I think we're going to push back harder on it because, like you're saying, we don't want to show something that would be a flag for somebody sitting at the federal level to go, oh, look, Ashland County didn't spend all their money. So we're pushing for it to say LATCF because the county has spent all its ARPA funds.
Yeah, I'm personally very much in support of that.
Yeah.
If you want the committee to weigh in and we could do that. But yeah,
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, no, we'll get it changed. I don't think there'll be an issue with it, but
All right.
no, it's a good catch on your part. So thank you for bringing it up for discussion.
All right. Any other questions on this? Okay, thank you. Then we'll move to the next part, which is going to be the 4C, the capital budget request. So Caroline, you put this together?
Yeah, so this was updated as of yesterday. So there are print offs here, which I think everyone grabbed. We just had a couple small changes up to the last minute yesterday, which are good. We are also, I guess the big thing to note is actually at the bottom of this report. If you want to scroll down, Dan, a little bit. The bottom of this report shows where we are kind of balancing out with our cap this year. Steve and I were able to finalize numbers here for what our true limit is. The leases that we have to incorporate as a liability that'll count against our debt ceiling basically this year. And with those new numbers and the revised requests, we're coming in with a little bit of space in that cap. So that's right now we could afford to agree to everything that's on this list. Technically,
We have the capacity. To
we
do
have
so.
we have the financial room. Whether we want to or not is.
Questions, comments? Steve?
Yeah, so thank you. So yeah, not really related to the capital, but just under our report, if I could say one more thing, I think. So sorry. Not specific to the budget report, but in the process of working with Ashland County, we do look at your draft audited financial statements. We and Carolyn prepared your Form A, which is your state financial report to the Department of Revenue. That was filed initially by May 15th. Now that the audit's completed, we did complete an amendment for audit adjustments they made. That's completed and it's not filed with Department of Revenue yet because as part of issuing your financial statements, the county has to sign a representation letter before the CPA firm will release the financials and issue the opinion. So as soon as that is completed, we'll have the opinion letter for your Form A. That will get filed with DOR. But what we wanted to offer, and we don't know this if it's true or not, but does Kerber Rose meet with your committee to kind of go over your financials in more detail? Or are they just presented to you and not? Because we would offer to maybe take a little deeper dive into your financials at your next meeting. Once the report is final and issued, that would be the appropriate time to do that.
Kerber Rose does not present. They just send us the financials and I forward them off to the finance committee.
Okay, so I guess if the committee was interested, we would be happy to, go through which we have and reviewed things and, give you our opinion and kind of point out things and maybe just a little deeper dive, not getting totally into the weeds, but, maybe a half hour kind of. And Mike, if you want to chime in, I know you may have some comments on this. So,
Yeah, okay, yes, and just so you know, and I know some of the newer members of the committee, I've been doing things like this for many counties for a long, long time. So, um, and so anyway, we'd be happy to, Steve and I, both of us together, like we can give you some trends and unusual information or where you're headed in certain areas, that I can see from the financial statements. So.
Sure, it looks like we would be happy to take you up on that offer.
okay,
All
good.
right, thank you.
Yep.
So, any other questions on what Carolyn had?
I mean, the other thing is we can run through the list again. We can talk about the items that are on here if you guys want to. I don't know how you want to approach this.
So a few weeks ago, when I was in for a different meeting, I told Carolyn it'd be really helpful if she put a spreadsheet together, which is what we're looking at, so that we could look at the source of fundings for capital requests this year in particular, because we have a cap because of last year, when we went back and captured what we hadn't captured early from that new construction. So she put this together so we can see that. So one of the questions I have is like in the sheriff's department, right where you're at, right at the top in that column, you've got debt levy there, but most of these are borrowing. By borrowing, are you implying debt levy?
So the borrowing will be, and Steve, you can jump in if I'm explaining this incorrectly. But borrowing is what we will actually go to the bank for. When we just say debt levy, it means we will put it on the debt levy without having to go to the bank to borrow. Borrowing, I mean, my interpretation of this is that we need the money upfront to fund some of these capital items. The leases are payments that are made over a year, so we don't necessarily need to borrow for them. We'll have the funding coming in from the debt levy.
Yeah,
In
I
time.
can, yep. So there is, both of them become your tax levy for your debt service fund. The difference is a lease is a financial vehicle that qualifies for the debt levy exception by being a lease, a capital lease. So you don't have to borrow to legitimize that as a debt levy expense. So it goes immediately to your debt levy. The other items that are listed as borrowing, you need to borrow and issue a note for 366 days to have it qualify for the being able to be on your debt levy. So Carolyn is just showing you when it says borrowing, those items, if you approved all of them, would equal what you would go to the bank in November and issue a note to fund those capital items that then would get paid off via your debt levy. Does that make sense?
So where does, like on the sheriff's department, where you have debt levy on that entry there, is that included in what we can total for the debt levy?
Yep.
That's my understanding it is. So if you scroll
Yes.
down a bit, so when we hit other things like jail assessment there or highway equipment fund, these other things other than borrowing or debt levy, we know are funded by things where if we need to trim something for the debt levy, those are funded in other ways. So if we do get in a spot where we say, okay, we got to find something to trim, anything that shows up as borrowing or debt levy are the things that this committee and board would have to look at and say, okay, what can we put off or live without?
Yes.
Okay, so that's really helpful because in the previous formats, we're going through this stuff and it's really hard to keep track of if we need to trim something or want to, what it's adding up to. So that's really helpful.
Yep. I guess the distinction would be on the lease items in there that say debt levy. Those leases have already been issued and you're making
Yeah.
payments. So there's really no decision to make at this time. where your decision point is where it says borrowing. Or I suppose you could, you know, if it had a funding source and you just totally disagreed with buying whatever they were going to buy, you could say, we don't want to spend our jail assessment money on that, or, you know, whatever. Because those decisions can be made too. But you are correct. If it says jail assessment, or I think it said LRIP on a couple things and equipment funds, those have their own funding source that you're not having to borrow, and they would pay for themselves from those funding sources.
Okay. So in past years, we'd always kind of have this, I don't know about the rest of you, but you had this gut feeling like, what is this going to add up to? Where's it coming from? So this helped with that. So thank you. Okay.
There is one thing off this list I'd like to strike off, and that's the forestry one for second landing dredging. That's going to cost way more than 50 grand. We already know at a bare minimum it's 200,000, and Chris got a quote for 402,000. So so we're out getting more quotes, and this work couldn't be done till next year anytime. And I'd say that we just strike it off this year and worry about it next summer.
Someone want to make a motion to strike the dredging, the 50,000 there, which last meeting we talked about taking it from contingency, but we're looking at just striking it now.
Well, we're looking at just, we don't have no clue what the dollar amount is. It's a minimum 200 grand. And Erica's going to be working on trying to get a grant, but you know, until we know how much of a grant we're going to get, I mean, we still, we don't know how much we're going to have to pay, or whether we want to pay or whatever. The decision this committee will have to make next year when we actually have real quotes.
Ron will make a motion to strike the second landing dredging for 50,000.
I'll second.
Second by Clarence. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So as long as we're looking at the capital requests, I'm thinking a couple of years ago, we approved buying a grader during budget season because prices were going to go up. So we did a short-term note with the bank, and that seemed to make sense. And last meeting, when we heard about the prices of IT equipment and the increases there, and it seems like they're going to keep going up, I'm just wondering if we shouldn't consider approving purchases of IT equipment sooner than later, given, you mentioned the servers in particular, like doubling and stuff. And I'm wondering if, even if we use contingency for that, for this amount, it's in the realm of possibilities, if that would make sense to consider.
I think maybe Steve can answer. This is a legal question. Can we use contingency to purchase servers this year and use debt levy to replace the contingency money?
So the first part of your question would be, yes, you could use contingency funds to buy the servers. Could you replace it by borrowing in the future? The only way I think that is legal, and I'm not a bond counsel, but from my experience, I would say that you would need to have a refunding resolution passed saying that you want to, or a reimbursement resolution saying you want to reimburse yourselves for those funds in your borrowing that's going to happen in the future. And then you could become eligible to do that way.
Because given the estimates last time from IT, by the time we go through budget season, we get into next year, it's just really hard to know what these things are going to cost, but it seems like it's going to be a lot more than otherwise. And given the numbers here, if we consider approving it early, going through that process, it might well be worth doing.
Well, I can tell you the price of RAM and hard drives are just skyrocketing. Data centers are taking up 70% of the supply, literally. They're pretty much, it's so bad Apple had to raise their prices by $100. I mean, and they make their own silicon. I mean, Austin, I would like to say something.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, for the RAM and storage prices, they peaked in February or March and have been holding since then. But you're absolutely correct that we don't have any way to know that it won't change again. And so, like, some of the companies like Apple just raised their prices in like June or July because they're catching up. But like the actual components themselves have kind of held since February or March. I just wanted to say that.
If we just leave it in the budget as is and we get into next year and you have the funds, if you had to guess, how would you think prices compare when we hit 2027 compared to now?
My best guess would be that there's a chance they increase, and the only reason I say that is because there was also some constraints to manufacturing of chips due to the Strait of Hormuz being closed, and we haven't seen that reflected on the market yet. So that would be my main concern of prices increasing potentially.
Can I,
Yeah,
can I offer a couple maybe ideas or solutions, maybe potential solutions?
Go ahead, Steve.
Sure. Um, so I've encountered this, you know, in my prior lives as a finance person working for a municipality, where like when vehicles were hard to get because of computer chips, what we did is when we approved the budget in October and November, and we knew that we were going to do what we said we were going to do, we let the department go and order those things right away. A, to get in on the list sooner because of delays in production, and B, to save price increases in the future. That's one idea I would throw out there that you could do. Another idea would be similar to what I forget if Dan mentioned it or you, Mr. Kinney, is you could borrow right now to do this stuff and just add that to your note that you're going to issue for the remaining things in November. And that would become your debt levy then for your 2027 budget. So, I mean, you do have some options. If you think that you want to do that, you know, that we could make it work if that's the direction you wanted to go.
You know, I didn't hear anybody say they thought chips might go down. I guess my personal inclination is we authorize the administration and staff to develop a plan to bring forward sooner than later to allow for these purchases. Because if we look at large increases again, I mean, even if it's 20, 30, 40,000 that we save, that's still real money. And we know the direction of that market. But if a month or two for now, some reason things come down, okay, you know, we wouldn't have purchased it probably yet unless we do it the first thing that Steve suggested. But I'm just thinking of that grader a few years ago, it made sense to authorize that early, but that came from the highway equipment fund later to repay that. But that worked out well for us, approving that early purchase.
So can we, I mean, Dan and I work with Austin and Taylor and look at things that we kind of anticipate could really have a price increase, not to blanket fund.
Right,
everything
things
that
that would have a
but-
price increase, it would make sense for the county to expend the time and effort, resources to
Buy it now.
bring something back to this committee. And if the committee's okay with it, you know, allowing that to go straight to the board, if that just keeps things moving more so than otherwise. So what was the preference of the committee? So Carolyn's suggestion is that work with Austin to develop a recommended list of considering purchasing early and a method of purchasing and financing. And would we want that to come back to finance, or are we okay with it then going to the board if that keeps the timeline moving, which may be beneficial?
I was going to say, I don't think we should just take it straight to the board, and
Yeah.
as long as we've approved that approach here.
Okay. So someone want to state a motion then?
I'll make a motion that Carolyn work with
Okay.
Austin
Going
and
down
Taylor
there.
to come up with a plan.
We'll see.
when I get back.
Is that Gary Murdoch? Huh? Okay, go ahead.
I'll make that motion that that Carolyn and Austin and Taylor put together a plan for look at what we need to take a look at for the purchase of computer equipment and so forth.
And then
Ron
send
will
it to the
second.
board. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All
Yeah,
in favor?
Pat.
Dick?
Yeah, I just want a question for Dan. I just wonder if he's taken into consideration at all doing something to upgrade that sound system. I swear to God that half the people on the county board now cannot hear what the hell is being said. And this is one of the reasons why Marty VTech didn't run. Couldn't hear what was going on anymore.
Yeah, we're looking at doing a replacement next year. But we can certainly have Taylor and Austin check out how much it would cost to do it this year, seeing as we do have a little bit of money left on our debt levy.
I kind of wish we could get something going before next year.
It's in the 2028 budget.
Oh, sorry, it's in the 28 budget. We can look at how much it costs to upgrade sooner. If
Yeah,
that's what
we've done that at least once since I've been on the board, and you might as well just take that money and throw it right out the window. The system we have now is just ridiculous
okay.
for the technology that's out there now, you know.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk to Austin about that when we talk to him about this other stuff. See if we can't do it for this year yet.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Did you have anything else? Okay. Carolyn, are we done with this item then?
I think so. I don't know if there was anything else we wanted to talk through on here.
No, the only thing I was making sure everybody's okay with the highway request, which was at last meeting. I could pull up again. Although we can wait on that too.
Well, I do have some things on highway. I was just gonna wait. And I wanted to come back to this when we get to the highway item.
Is it? It's not actually, it's not an item, so it's on here. So let me go find it.
From the June 4th meeting?
Yeah.
So what specifically do you want to talk
Well, I
about?
just want to make sure we're okay with the equipment budget. I think,
Are you talking about the total or how it's allocated?
well, both. I mean, I think we're all okay with the road work.
Well, I have a question on that later, but we'll get to it when we get to that agreement.
Okay.
On the highway budget, the allocation there. Any comments? Well, I'll make a comment. I went to a forestry meeting in Butternut a few weeks back. And honestly, I was really shocked at how far behind the county is on brushing to get heading south of Glidden. I mean, I was really, really surprised. And I mean, I just don't see other roads that far behind on brushing for the most part. And so if you're going to have a mini excavator, which will be handy in spots for a number of things, including brushing, but also doing culverts, which are the responsibility of whoever owns the culvert, you know, touching up there. Maybe we have some flooding and there's some sediment that runs into a ditch that we need to clean up. But if we're doing culvert work for which we're either not reimbursed because this private landowner is responsible for those culverts, as I well know. But then if it is reimbursed by the state. Let's say there's flooding and sediment that runs and we need to do with that. Okay, fine. What concerns me is you've got so much brushing to do mile after mile. It seems, I'm not on the highway committee, so these aren't my decisions, but it seems that we need brushing equipment and manpower using brushing equipment. And if the state is paying for this, which they, through the reimbursement, it would seem to me literally covering far more ground with the skid steer and attachment for brushing before that gets so big that you then need to have guys with chainsaws on some of that. So in terms of allocating resources, the mini excavator would be nice. And at the Farm Boy, we always thought about getting an excavator, but the question was, can we justify that expense for the amount of we use it versus hiring someone when we need it? We never bought one. So instead we hire someone because it just didn't make sense. The money was better allocated for other things. And I look at that mini excavator. Yep, it'd be nice to have one. No question, you could use it. But in terms of priorities, it seems brushing should be a higher priority. And I also, we're going to talk about people taking vehicles home. We allocate money to vehicles, and now I can't stop thinking about that brushing. And why are we buying vehicles that go home versus brushing? So I think there's more conversations coming on this.
I just want to say there is a rationale for the excavator. At the county board, next meeting, we're gonna have a road and culvert aid or bridge and culvert aid resolution where the towns are paying the highway department to do culvert work.
If we could bring in the revenue, because
They will be bringing in the revenue from the culvert work. The towns will be paying us for it. And so that mini excavator will become useful when we're doing that. So I think it is a worthwhile purchase, and I think that we're going to get a lot of use out of it with the new bridge and culvert aid.
agenda item that we saw, talked about cleaning culverts. It didn't include what you just said. If we can bring in revenue, and we proved the
Yes.
position on the board last year through exec and came to finance too, is, the idea was that person would bring in revenue to cover that position.
Right.
And so-
And this will be bringing in revenue because all the towns except for LaPointe agreed to this plan where they would get the towns would get an extra tax from the county, and we would approve certain projects for each county or each town. And that's where the excavator would come in handy because we would actually doing culvert work for the towns where we would be getting paid for with tax dollars that were levied at the town's request.
And there'd be sufficient revenue to justify purchasing one versus renting.
Yes, it would be sufficient revenue to justify purchasing one instead of renting. And I
So-
believe Matt wants to talk about it
So we'll
too.
see an update on the,
So yeah, I think it's worth it. So that's my opinion.
okay, Matt?
Yeah, as Dan said, if the bridge aid package is passed, that will bring in, I believe, a fair amount of revenue, which would go toward this excavator. But I'd like to address the brushing issue. The brushing on the state highways, I agree, it's really bad, especially toward the south end. Brushing is something that's kind of last on the state's list. So when we have a winter like we just did, we pretty much use up most of the funding for winter maintenance. When we have a lighter winter, we're able to do more brushing. So, if we had a mini excavator, that would help us out with that. But the bulk of that brushing does get done with a skid steer and a brush head, which is much faster. But when you have certain slopes that machine can't run on, this would help out. But where this would really shine for brushing, we spent, I believe, 8 winters cutting the right of way back on County Highway GG by hand, or shearing the big trees and chipping them. That is county highway. That brush is growing way too fast. Also, we've tried to go in there with a skid steer, and with the stumps in there, the stumps are just too hard. It just basically tears the tracks right off of the skid steer. So it's just not possible. So if we had this excavator with a brush head on it, we could sit in the ditch part that doesn't have stumps and reach to take care of that brush. a little further back that is, like I said, it's just growing too fast. You know, that's coming out of our county maintenance dollars, but you know, it's a lot cheaper than spending 8 years in the near future having to go and cut that whole section out again.
So you can give us an updated agenda, Bill, with the background on the things that you and Dan talked about and numbers and those agreements with the townships. So we have something in writing to look at, but also so the public has something in writing to look at.
Yeah, it'll be on the next county board agenda. So you'll see the actual resolution there
Resolution for,
to create the bridge aid program.
okay, but there's no guarantee that we would get funding, is there?
Yes,
Or
there is. The county would, the way it worked. Matt, what's the percentage?
I mean, it's a 50. The you know, the town would pay 50% for culverts, and the tax levy would pay 50%. There's no guarantee that they could use a private contractor,
Right.
but I believe with our we're
Well, I guess the towns get like, was it a 0.1% extra tax, property tax? Something, a minimal amount. And then
Yeah.
that money plus a town match is used to do the work. So
so this would come to the board agenda on
Next
July
meeting.
28th then?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, so you'll see all that. And Matt will be able to explain the whole program then. Highway just approved it. So, and most counties do this program. So there will be funding coming in to pay for that excavator.
And there'll be things in writing, so we have this background to read ahead of the meeting then?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Anything else on this then? We ready to go to the next item? The Sheriff's Department.
This was just an updated version of their capital outlay request, which is reflected in that KIP spreadsheet that we just were looking at. Dave made some adjustments to what they were requesting, which took out the shed and the fencing. Yep. Remove that from the request for this year. So it shrunk down their request, but this is just the documentation for that.
Questions, comments? I got a question on the investigator vehicle. I'm looking at page 2 of the document, and it says the investigator vehicle is at the end of lease. And under county-owned vehicles with higher mileage, it shows an investigator vehicle. If we own the investigator vehicle, if that's accurate, how does end of lease make sense? Or is it more like end of life? So the second page of this document. So, yeah, you're fine, Dan. So kind of in the middle bullet towards the top there, it says we have an investigator vehicle at 100,000 miles, and then we go down below in the middle, investigator vehicle, end of lease. If we own the investigator vehicle, if that's accurate, what does end of lease mean if we own it? Or is it end of life?
So for one of the investigator vehicles, it was a Traverse that is 100,000 miles. That vehicle actually got moved into the spare vehicle category. And currently the sheriff's vehicle, which is one of the Traverses on the list highlighted in yellow. It's a 2023 Traverse. Those two Traverses are due or end of lease in June of 2027. But Enterprise currently said that the market for used vehicles. It would help us if we sold those vehicles prior to 2027. So those two vehicles, which would be two investigators.
So do you, near the paragraph that towards the top starts with currently, and then you get to the right, it says 3 admin vehicles. Is an investigator vehicle considered an admin vehicle?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it falls into that category. So this is one of those vehicles,
Yes, sir.
but it's not one that the county owns.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Any other questions or comments on this? So we're getting an update on the sheriff department vehicles and we're not taking any action at this point on it?
No, we don't have to now. I mean, we're gonna have to approve the new vehicles at some, at this meeting or future meetings.
Okay.
But Dave, can you go over that again? Because I think he was making a point that if we sell some of these vehicles, return some of these vehicles now, we're gonna get a better price than if we wait.
A better price. That's what they're claiming to us, that we would get more money now if we sold those two Traverses and the van. The van's, the end of lease is due in well, it's end of the lease is in October of this year. And then June of next year, both Traverses are end of lease. So they figured due to our using, they compared the numbers and they basically stated because of those two vehicles, one being the Tundra, the Toyota Tundra, or I mean Tacoma, that vehicle, it's not open for bid yet. It's opened up for bid at the end of this month. And the window to order that vehicle is weeks. And then they shut down the bidding or the actual window to actually order that vehicle.
So on the agenda, this is under discussion / action item. So as far as notice, we can take action if we want to. I don't see anything in the agenda bill unless I missed it there that is asking us to take action today. So when you say now, you literally mean now as opposed to prior to selling, prior to entering into leases, you mean like action today? Is that what you're looking for?
If we could, yes.
Okay.
One of the notions made on these prices was that these prices are based on us selling those two Traverses and then that van prior to 2027. So we would order it now and we wouldn't pay till January of 27.
So in this agenda item, one of the things that you've mentioned a number of times through meetings is it's important for the county to have backup vehicles. So if you're going to sell like now as in now, but we're not entering in leases and getting new vehicles, you're comfortable with the gap between?
Yeah, I think this year we will be fine. I think in the future, probably 1 or 2 years from now, we would possibly purchase our leased vehicles,
Okay.
purchase them because they're already outfitted, like you had mentioned prior. The cost of outfitting them is expensive. So we would purchase a lower mileage vehicle. The gap right now, we're looking at anywhere between 127 and 155 for 2 spare vehicles, which is okay. We don't put much mileage on the spare vehicles, but we need them when those other vehicles go in for repair.
Okay. So I'm going to go to Matt before we have a motion in case what Matt, do you want to speak or do you just not take your hand down?
I did not take my hand down, sorry.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So I think we're ready for a motion on what Dave is asking for. And can you tell us so that we can write this down to get it right? What are you asking for in a motion?
Motion to approve the purchase of those 3 vehicles from Enterprise.
What about the selling part?
Oh, I'm sorry. And to approve the selling of the 2 Traverses and the Chrysler Voyager for Enterprise to sell them on our behalf.
So when you say the purchase of 3 vehicles from Enterprise, does that, are you talking about actual purchase or are you talking about entering into leases?
Entering into leases, I'm
So
sorry.
entering into leases, and we would wait to enter into those leases. Are we gonna do that now also, or are we waiting till later in the year to enter into those leases?
Well, we do that in January because we
You
can't
don't
get
have
the,
the pricing yet.
and we can't get the vehicle done. I mean, just because they have to bid it out, the car has to be built. I mean,
So
Yeah.
by entering into the leases now, you're hoping to get a better price than by waiting, correct?
Correct. And then the window for especially the Toyotas is very small window to order them.
Okay. So committee members, someone ready to make a motion to nail what Dave just said?
Okay, Ron's gonna make a motion that we sell the 2 vehicles,
Traverses?
two Traverses and 1 van. And also to approve the purchase,
Or the
Uh,
lease,
the lease of the Toyota.
Explorer.
Okay, Toyota Explorer and Pacifica.
you have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And Lori, if you need clarification, you can check with Dave later.
Wait, yeah, was that 2 Toyota Explorers and what was the other vehicle?
Sorry, Lori, it's 1 Explorer, 1 Toyota Tacoma, and then 1 Pacifica van.
Thank you.
So we're ready for the next item on the state municipal project agreement? Or you,
this is actually just for your information. It goes along with the request, the highway request. So this is just showing you we have the LRIP money that we're getting for the road building.
well, I've got a few questions.
Oh yeah, well, Matt's on the phone.
So, yeah, this is part of the LRIP funding that we're getting to help fund County Road F next year.
So you said part, explain part to me.
So, Matt's request for 1.6 million. 1.3 of that is going to be part of the debt levy that we're borrowing for. Part of that is going to be funded by LRIP. And then part of it, a small portion will be funded by their fund balance. So this is just documentation from the state that they're confirming we're getting.
Want to scroll down slightly, Dan? Down. I'm sorry, up rather. So on this, the distance, I'm looking for, section length, 11,617 feet, that's 2.2 miles. And then if we go back to the June 4th meeting, where we looked at projects for next year, this project, if I understood it, County Highway F, that was showing as 3.3 miles. And so we've got LRIP for 2.2 miles. So my first question is why 2.2 miles versus 3.3?
I can answer that.
Go ahead.
So this project is broken into 2 pieces. There's 2 components to LRIP funding. This one here is CHI S, I believe, if you scroll up to the top of that. Yeah, right, program type CHI S. So the other component, that's county highway funding supplement, it's LRIP supplementary funding. There's also a regular LRIP funding that we get. so I had to break it. I can't put all the two programs into one piece. So I have to bid it as two separate projects, but it's basically they're together as one. They'll bid together. So the regular LRIP dollars, I'm trying to pull that up, that SMA is about, I can't remember off the top exactly, it's about 80,000. So it would be for that other portion of that project. If you remember back from that spreadsheet she showed, I think it was $262,000 in LRIP funding. Yeah, the one project is that SMA you just showed, and then the other project is the remaining, of that, the two LRIP grants will add up to that 262,000 for that project.
So this one's 2.2 miles. The whole project is 3.3. If I take this number, multiply by 1.5, because we've only got 2/3 of it, I come up with $269,836. So the 262 is a little shy, but it's in the ballpark of the 3.3 miles at what is provided in this letter.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily.
So we're in the ballpark.
Yeah, the other funding I just found at SMA, it's $82,689.99. And that is that other portion of the project from Elmwood Lane to Hoot Lane, where this one is from Hoot Lane to the county line. Iron County line at that County F termini.
Okay, so then when I go back to the spreadsheet Carolyn put together, in that one towards the bottom of the first page for Highway County Road F, there's a 262,580 there.
Yes.
We're going to be in the ballpark of that. And then that would be consistent with the document from June 4th meeting on highway road projects.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. It should, the $2,000 should equal that 262 for it's, I like to think of it as one project, but it has to be bid in two portions just for that funding. I have to, for the state portion, I have to bid each one separate.
Okay. I've mentioned this to Dan before. I'll direct this towards him since he's the administrator. Sometimes a little bit more background to explain some of these things would be really helpful. Because I'm looking at these numbers thinking, this doesn't quite add up. But now knowing it has to be split, it's like, okay, yep, sometimes that's the way life is. So, but yeah, sometimes just a little explanation that we otherwise wouldn't know helps us make sense of things. So anytime there's further explanation and more to read, it's appreciated. All right, anything else on this? Okay, then we'll go to the next item.
This is just an
health
update.
insurance?
This is just an update for you. So here we have the current rates with the premiums, and then the new rates with the premiums. It's a very minor increase for us on the magnitude of like 2%.
You're talking about the
The
state maintenance plan with Dean, right?
Yeah. This, what happened was, we were paying that 15% surcharge this year. Rates actually went up 17%, but because we're not paying the surcharge, we saw a very minor increase. So I do expect next year to see monstrous increases in health insurance due to, one, the cuts to the Affordable Care Act, which is why they went up so much this year. But two, and next year is when all the Medicaid cuts happened. So I expect to see health insurance go through the roof because of what Congress did in HR 1.
Yeah, so that state maintenance plan, Dean, and I think we've all been here since we switched that. We all have been. So we had a 30% surcharge and then dropped to 15, and now we don't have a surcharge. So it came to 2.566% increase this year. So,
yeah.
For employees, that's, last year it was pretty even, and then the year before, switching was still pretty darn close to had we not switched. But next year, it's gonna bite, no question from everything. I'm sure you folks in the room with finances are well aware that it's really gonna bite. But it also then means going forward with the budget process, we've had several years here where we've held steady, approximately on the premiums. But next year, we're gonna have to budget for more on the county's health insurance part as our, the employees are gonna see that too.
Yeah.
And then when we get to, employee compensation, we're just gonna have to bear in mind that that's going up too, and try to be as fair as we can as on what they're paid.
Well, yeah, I mean, the other reason why insurance is going to go up is just inflation. I mean, it's a combination of inflation and HR1 and, even the GLP-1s are another reason. Although our insurance doesn't cover it, it's one of the reasons why costs are still going up all over the place. We still feel the other thing for us is, like you can see some counties have better rates, but we're stuck with Essentia and we don't have competing healthcare companies. We're not like Dane County where there's multiple different places, or Milwaukee County where there's a whole bunch of places. We have one. And then we have Essentia, and then we have the hospital, which they could basically set their own rates.
I think if we not switched, given how much insurance has gone up,
we would be far behind if we.
we'd be paying a lot more had we not switched. So, of all the things that we've done in my time here, the thing I'm happiest about is switching the health insurance, given where that was headed, and we did it. It was a big ask and commitment that year. I'm really glad we did it. And even though this is recorded, I sure wish my former employer would have done it, because if they had wanted to, they certainly could have done it.
Yeah.
So, but anyway.
But yeah, we may have to look at some sort of adjustments next year.
And then you can stay on it when you retire, which is a nice option too.
But here's the other thing. We don't know what's going to happen in November. I mean, the legislature could give us more shared revenue, or they could give us more taxes. I mean, there's a number of things that can happen to make our 28 budget easier. So I guess let's not worry about it until after the election.
We'll find out.
Hmm.
The solar lease, going to the next item. I sent you a file last
And
night.
actually, I didn't get, there was no file attached.
Oh, okay. Then
I just put it on here as a discussion item.
yeah, let me pull up my email then.
But can I, before we get on this, can we go to the,
Did I miss something?
well, the van contract?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can we go on to, because Clarence has to leave at 10:30. So before we get into discussion, can we go through the rest of the agenda items, then go back to the solar? Just,
Sure.
just to make sure Clarence gets out. So, Spark lease would be the next item. So Spark has been using Extension's vehicle for a long time. Extension needs the vehicle now. So he wants to lease a vehicle using the Spark grant dollars to pay for it. We got a quote for this was cheaper than Enterprise. So it's so the lease payments are $579.60, and the Enterprise payments were like $900 for the same vehicle. So again, this would not count towards our debt levy. I don't think it's not written that way. But it would be paid for with Spark dollars. So it's not really costing the county anything. And there is about 2.5 years left on the Spark grant. So even if it doesn't get renewed and there's a 3-year lease, Spark would be able to pay off the lease, the 3-year lease. And then, if Spark doesn't get renewed and for some reason the county decided to want to purchase the vehicle, we could purchase it for $23,000. and use it for other projects. So. So this is, they need the vehicle now because they're running the summer programs right now. I guess if you want to know more information about Spark, Mr. Campbell can tell you all about it. I know his committee supports that program a lot.
It's been an extremely worthwhile program that Scott has put together there, and we feel like it's kept a lot of teenage kids out of trouble that otherwise would have cost us dollars in providing services for them. So I'll make a motion that we approve the lease of the Spark vehicle for Spark.
Ronald, second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Erica has an update she'd like to give you. We decide, I'm sorry, this is so small, we can't really put it on the screen. But this is a list of all the grants.
Yeah, that was just for kind of reference. The report is, I think, more important. I guess the overview of my report is that we have been awarded some very nice awards. In February, we won a Federal Highway Administration FLAP grant for $600,000 for engineering design and NEPA, for expanding the roadway for multimodal use for 14 miles of CTHH on the point. In March, we won $40,000 for the Wiscom interoperable radios. We also won a coastal management program grant for $181,000 to pay partially for the Maxwell Forest property along the White River to purchase it from Northland College. Landmark Conservancy has grants and donations to cover the rest of it. But because that we would have to put up that money because the DOA is not releasing it until after the deal was supposed to close. The holding of the grant has been transferred to Bayfield County. So we still won the money, but the holding of it has been transferred to Bayfield.
And Bayfield County will be making the payment in the interim until the grant is awarded.
And then just last month, we had finality on our innovation grant, which will provide $683,000 over the next 5 years for whatever we want to do with. And that's for combining our PSAP with Bayfield County as well. Otherwise, we have submitted other grants. Several are still pending. A couple of applications have been denied. Put other updates in there about other kind of advising work and grant research work that I have done for nonprofits and municipalities. Currently, I'm working on a very large $3.2 million earmark that we won, that Christina won, for emergency radio tower equipment throughout the county, so that EMS and sheriff and all first responders can become part of full users of the Wiscom system and connect us with all other counties around us as well. But even though we have been promised the money, we now go through the full formal process of applying for the money. And that has been extremely truncated because although we were identified as a winner in January, they did not send us any official paperwork until last month, and the deadline for everything is in 5 days. So we are working as a tight team of 4 of us to get that done by next Thursday, right, Dave? And last week I was also able to pull in Caroline. So thank you very much, Caroline. Team effort. We'll get this done. Otherwise, there's nothing else huge pending that I'm working on right now. And I am thankful for that because I have a backlog of about 2 months and about 14 requests for guidance and research from additional nonprofits, as well as the sound system, as well as, what else are we looking at in the county? Second landing dredging, as well as still trying to get the wind sled funded as well. So I'll be working on that for the next several weeks. For all of those requests, trying to get back to people. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
You know, on the list of things where you assisted, et cetera, you had reviewed the grant application for Spark. We just talked about Spark, you know, you did that. It's not on the list. I really appreciate you working with others and sharing time, resources, expertise, and the networking. I've known grant writers where they wouldn't give anybody the time of day and work with anybody, share any information, whatever. And I always thought it was a lost opportunity because collectively it's better. And you've been really generous with time and expertise and resources of the network. I really, really appreciate that.
Thank you, Pat. It's one of my favorite parts of the job, honestly. It is. Yeah.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you.
All right, then these next two are just real quick. Investments are holding steady. Obviously, the amounts will change if interest rates change. I don't expect the Fed to do anything with interest rates, so I don't think our rates will change much. Sales tax. You're just gonna say, wow. It's gone up dramatically. The number you're seeing is through April, really. I mean, that 175 was for April. So what we've seen is since the line 5 construction has started, our sales tax has gone crazy. Because it really picked up the 172, and that's when they started cutting down trees. So I fully expect our numbers will be way high this year, way over. But now we can go back to your.
So I sent it to you. I think you should have it in your email.
I can't get on.
Okay. So
I mean, I can run downstairs and try.
no, it's
I can run downstairs and put it on the Everyone Drive, and then we can look at it.
okay. Or I can just talk about it
Okay.
for a little bit. So a few months ago on the zoning committee, I believe it was, I've been talking to, you know, the thought about expanding solar south of the Ordock Solar in Ashland. To me, it seemed, okay, we've got 20 acres there. We don't intend to build anything anytime soon, like the next 30 years or more, given improvements to this building and to the jail. But the county doesn't seem to have an interest in selling it either. So Ordock Solar is there. It's a 1 megawatt project. And it seemed worth considering if we could expand that solar capacity south of that in the county land. In December, I got a letter from a developer who wanted on my farmland east of Mason, put in a utility scale solar farm, and the state defines utility scale as 100 megawatts or larger. So what we have in Ashland is 1 megawatt. They wanted to put something 100 to 150 times as big out there. They actually wanted my property as the center of it and build a new substation on it. Because I have one post in the high voltage power line that runs through a corner, and then it would be central to what they want to do. They're still actively looking at that. So anyway, I did a bunch of reading on solar farms and this whole process. For utility scale, the Public Service Commission does the permitting on that. It's not local control. Less than 100 megawatts, we have some local control on that. So anyway, having read that process and doing some research on the return of investments, these big solar farms, some of these investors, I describe it as a wild, wild west of people putting in solar farms, deep-pocketed investors. In fact, in Wisconsin, the line of people submitting applications to the PSC included a pile of companies wanting to get in the queue for review, but really didn't have any meaningful capacity to develop a project. They wanted to get in the queue, so the PSC would start reviewing things and saying, wait a minute, you're not ready, you don't have the financing, you don't have the land, you've got to have made some progress, and they gave some guidelines. So one of the things I realized is, well, there's several things. WPR had a story a couple of days ago. Wisconsin's going to add 40% more electricity by 2032, 6 years from now. Where it comes from, a lot of it's going to be solar. So what's happening is on the large side, you've got these big developers, deep-pocketed investors looking for places to put those in, generally along high voltage power lines. But where they can add power depends on what power lines you have, where the demand is, et cetera. Xcel put out an RFP in December, and they'll probably put out an RFP each year for more power. So different parties are proposing adding capacity in different places. So most of it's solar. And then a couple of days ago, Eric and I and Alyssa Radke were at a session and talking about, primarily solar, but really smaller projects on building or a site for a building. And then there's this gap in between, I'm calling it a gap, between the big deep-pocketed investors and then the people trying to do something on a building or on some adjacent space outside of like a county garage. So there's this gap there. And this Xcel site and our land 20 acres south is what I would consider a gap. It's not big enough to draw the deep-pocketed investors, and yet I've got a letter from One Energy put in that solar farm, and I've got a letter from them last evening. They are, and I guess I won't read the thing, but what we need to do now as a county is we need to enter into an agreement with them saying on a formal basis, yes, we're interested. So the first part of this is they want to do some homework, some research. The person I'm working with was actually up here a few weeks ago, looked at the site. His dad, ironically, picked Ashland to move to. So he's up visiting his dad and looked at the site. He thinks 15 of the 20 acres are suitable for adding solar panels and battery storage. Most projects these days that are developed, they're going to have battery storage because that technology is at a point where battery storage makes sense. So anyway, if I sent it to Dan correctly this time, as a county, we need to enter into an agreement with them, I'm not saying contract yet, because they want to be able to go on the land, do survey work, and do some of the prep work that they need to do to figure out just exactly what they can put and where. And as they go through that process, then we'll get to a contract which we would sign and we're committed to. So what they're asking for the moment is for us to agree to, which I would take as signing something, that we will work with them to develop this project versus some different company that potentially could do this. One Energy is a very reputable company from everything I've read. They did the project here. But there's also companies that are frankly fly by night, just looking to make a fast buck and don't have the capacity to do the work that they promise. So we want to work with a reputable company, which One Energy, by all accounts, is. So one of the questions I had for Dan is, if we enter into this lease, they're proposing to offer us $800 per year per acre on 15 acres, which is 12,000 plus 2% annual increases. And on solar farms, they generally have a contract for 30 years with options to extend as much as 50 years if the project is still viable. So that would give us 12,000 a year. We would check some goals as far as, producing energy locally, et cetera. Yeah.
I believe Erica has some comments about this after she was at her conference yesterday.
Yeah, so I went to day 2 as well of the conference. And one of the things I learned is that, so the Northern Midwestern representative for the Nature Conservancy lives here in Ashland.
Right.
And he is a former Northland professor as well. But the Nature Conservancy has put together an energy opportunity map explorer that at the parcel level will create parameters that you can turn on and off for what that parcel might be good for renewable types of renewable energy and other things to sort of think about, like social things too. So could it actually be better used as farmland, or is it low grade farmland, or is it too much in shadow, or is it? And so I spoke to him and asked him if he might come to a finance meeting sometime soon. And he said, absolutely, yes. And if we send him parcel numbers, he can give us a full kind of backdrop of how the tool works, but also what the county might want to think about. I know that we've talked about that parcel, just as recently as a year and a half ago for low income housing or low moderate housing, and hit some roadblocks with that. So I guess my other thought coming out of the conference over the past 2 days is that I think it might be a really good idea for the county to pursue what's called strategic energy planning. And we can get that for free, apparently for free or very inexpensively. That would actually give us, because what we, at least in my mind, what right now, what we have is the goodwill, and it has been written into our comp plan for the past 10 years that we want to pursue these things for both resilience and for possible revenue generation, right? What we don't have is that middle ground of what sites could do what sort of before we seek bids for what to do with what, right? So, and coming out of that conference, what I've learned is that there's a ton of nonprofits in that middle ground space that will help us make wise choices. And I'm not saying that this is not a wise choice, but I'm just wondering if we should back up one step to have an evaluation, a sort of third party, non-interested evaluation of what that parcel is and what might be possible for solar, or maybe possible other options as well.
So part of the process for putting in solar that connects to a utility is an interconnection agreement. So it has to be something that provides power in a location that fits into the grid and the planning for the utility that's going to enter into the agreement to purchase that power. So depending on, let's say there's farmland north of Iron River that's sandy and eroded and non-productive. But if it's located more than a mile or so from a high voltage power line, that's essentially a non-starter for the utility. So my property, so the state of Wisconsin, also did a map similar to what you're talking about, or it may have some of the same data. And my place is smack dab in the middle of where the utility scale develops, or like it's on the high voltage power line. There's sufficient farmland to put in that if the landowners were agreeable. So, it's one thing to say what's the land suitable for, but part of the equation has to be for the utility, are they going to be interested in an interconnection agreement? And the city of Ashland for many years has talked about infill. And so, that should be part of their equation versus using other land. But for the county, there's also this factor of we want to own the land. We apparently haven't had interest in selling the land. So this would give us ownership of it, but also bring in revenue and checks and goals related to climate. The other thing to keep in mind with this is we don't know, Excel doesn't know, One Energy, who did this solar farm and is proposing to do the next, you never know who else is saying, I've got some land here. I'm interested in working with a developer to put in solar here. And then without knowing the details of the interconnection agreement on how much power can be generated at this particular site or close to it, we don't know if we delay this opportunity if someone else might be interested. And I know some people that are interested in this topic. I don't know if that would impact the possibility for this project. So, I've got some farmland that this would be real suitable for. High Rolls Lake Superior shoreline. It should be taken out of row crop production. Native grasses, warm season grasses would make perfect sense. My land that's the most productive is the 40 where the post is. high voltage power line post. And it'd be nice to keep farming that, but so this is something where we don't know what the future holds in terms of if we decide at some point in the future, yes, we're interested, we're not going to know if that opportunity is still there. And we just won't. And neither will Excel or One Energy. It just depends on who else is planning what. But what I realize is, I mean, $800 an acre, that's what they offered me on my land. I could likely get more at the starting point. One Energy is $800 an acre per year. And what this means is there are certainly people saying, I've got land on a high voltage power line where if I want to work with a developer, I can call them, they'll do the legwork, work with Excel in this case on the interconnection agreement and get far more money than I ever could farming. So there's only so much that we can control. And as much as it's nice to say, what is it suitable for? There's limitations on what works for the power company for the interconnection. That's the hard part.
You know, I don't know what the letter looks like because when Dan forwarded the email, you know, it wasn't part of it. But I did notice that they had this letter and they didn't want to pursue a lease. I guess I'd be a little hesitant to not have a full lease with them. So I would want to make sure we're talking to.
So this first part, and this is typically how this works is, so we have the terms here, is it's a process where they're going to look at the land, do some exploring, checking things out in simple terms to get to a point where they know how much solar and battery they can put on there. So you have the number of acres that they would lease and then other details. The part about, you know, someone can keep farming it is typical of what they do. It works for everybody that way. So there's this process where we're basically saying, yes, we're not going to pursue someone else to look at solar here if they're going to spend some time working to see what the possibilities are in finer detail so that we then get to a lease where we have the specifics.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
for example, they offered me $1,000 to sign a letter of intent where they could go out on my land and look at that. I declined to.
Okay, so basically we couldn't pursue anyone else if we signed
Right,
this
that's
letter
all we're
is what-
saying. If we're
so
going to
this
work with
is-
somebody, it's going to be One Energy, and they did the one that's there.
Okay. And then do they talk at all about what happens at the end of the lease term? I mean, just, you know, in
The
the
no-
interest of, you know, inevitably they'll have to put posts in and things like
Right,
that.
the normal process is that these have to be bonded, and so that there's money to remove the project at end of life.
Okay.
I guess my one question is, do we know if that deal they're offering is a good deal or not? I think we kind of need to look at that. I mean, $800 an acre, is that a good deal? I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I do think we need to consider that too. And I don't think it would hurt to use the tools Erica was talking about from Nature Conservancy to see what that says. You know, I mean, I don't know if, I think there's more research to do before we rush into it, I guess is my point. And I'm not sure how the rest of the board feels about it. I also have concerns if it's under a gigawatt or is it megawatt, whatever.
Megawatt.
The city makes life difficult. Because if it's over a megawatt, the PSC regulates it.
No, it's 100 megawatts.
It's 100 megawatts.
No, so it'd be local. So I asked him on zoning because it's within the city limits, the person I'm working with. We would enter this initial agreement where they would be working on developing this, but part of what he would then do is he would have to go to the city and ask them to zone it so they could put that in. And the zoning administrator, planning director for the city was at those same meetings earlier this week. So he's familiar with solar too.
I guess I'm not understanding the urgency to do it literally right now, when if we just gave it 1 or 2 more months, we could collect more information about the use of that property specifically for solar, if that's what the committee wants to decide to do with the land, because we actually haven't even fully decided that as a committee, as a county. And I understand the issue of bids, the issue of all these things, but also Wisconsin needs 40% more electricity in the next 7 years. And so and putting up solar is like getting cheaper and cheaper every single day. So I guess I just don't know, like, why is the accelerator?
The other thing I point out, this committee does not have jurisdiction over what to do with that land. That's PPLA. So you'd have to bring them involved, get involved with them too. I mean, yes, this committee has jurisdiction over the lease portion, but the actual use is PPLA. And
So the county bought it, Clarence, you were here more than a decade ago because we were filling up the jail and then some with the opioid crisis, people extrapolated. So the county's had it, for over a decade, and all we've done is let the farmer next door pay it. When budgets were real tight 5-6 years ago, was there interested in selling it? That got no traction. We could do something else with it. So it's, the county's had a long time, and largely it's just sat there, money that was spent and it sits and someone farms it, and the city talks about infill, and we know we are going to have a declining population. So, but to some extent, if we need 40% more electricity and we're going through this AI build out right now, it would not surprise me if, between now and 2032, 2035, that the places that are going to get solar, are largely built. And then, as they run through their life cycle, it's going to be cheaper to stay on the same land because they do site prep, put up fences. And so, sometime in the next 5 to maybe 10 years, there's going to be less built because it's going to be built. And so part of the interest in this was, from the economic development standpoint, there would be, some work that would support local contractors on the building it and the maintenance of it. I talked to a local person from Excel. Her estimate is roughly that this current power plant is roughly 50% of the electricity that we need. So we're bringing energy into this area, which means we bring energy in and the money goes out. Sometime in the next few years, Excel is going to start looking at what to do with the Bayfront power plant. And all things being equal, the less solar we have in this neck of the woods, the bigger that plant is going to have to be. So I think there's reasons to go through whatever process we go through and make a decision. Certainly, I know the person you're referring to, we could do that. I've looked at tools too, but I'd be more than happy to have them come to the meeting and go through that. But PPLE and
yeah, I mean, the actual use has to go through PPLA first. I mean, they are public property, so.
but with interconnection agreements, one thing we should keep in mind is we don't know how long this opportunity will be there, and neither will Excel nor will One Energy. It may be there for years, and it might be a month from now. It's like, yep, sorry, but somebody else has got a project that they've gotten to the point where there's an agreement. We don't know, and we have no way of knowing. But we know if there's going to be 40% more energy in Wisconsin, there's going to be a lot more solar. And given the numbers, you look at what you get for renting farmland up here. I get $25 an acre, which is on the high end. The $800 sounds awfully good, and I know some people that are interested. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a good idea. Like, I don't think it's a bad idea. I think we need to run it through public property. I would definitely like to hear from an outside entity to look at other opportunities we might have in the county too. And also maybe some reality check on what, their thoughts on what we're doing with One Energy and Excel. But yeah, those are just my 2 cents. Like, yeah, we're not doing anything with the property. It would be great to get some revenue off of it, some significant revenue, because $12,000 a year is not insignificant if they can truly do the 15 acres and $800 an acre.
But the other part of this, if we're gonna talk about the property, is does the county continue to want to own it? And
Again, that's a decision that has to go through PPLE first. I don't know, when I first started here, there was strong sentiment to keep owning it. But we have, of course, a lot of new board members, so I don't know what they think. And we haven't really talked about it since then.
Have to go.
all right, Clarence. Clarence is excused.
Let me make sure Dick is still here. We no longer have a quorum, so the meeting is over.
All right, we no longer have a quorum, so we're done.